To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight. The poet E.E. Cummings wrote these timeless words in 1958. In each of us, young and old, receives messages about who we ought to be. How we assimilate these messages with who we know ourselves to be is the spiritual discipline of living with integrity. Have you ever felt like you weren't being true to yourself? Or perhaps even that you were living kind of a double life? I know that LGBTQ and other marginalized people often know this reality well. It's called passing. Others of you may know this feeling when you're at work, where you can't be your full self. There's a divide between your work life and your home life. Or maybe you feel a gap between your vision of how best to live and the reality of your life currently. Or perhaps you are a proud Unitarian Universalist here at church, but sort of in the closet with more conservative family members and friends. That one is familiar, okay. If you have ever experienced this divide, you know that it is not a very joyful or fulfilling way to live. The truth that we hold within, or the soul, as Reverend White preached about so insightfully a couple weeks ago, is the core of our humanity. So when we are disconnected from the soul of who we are, we can sometimes feel a bit lost. The Quaker writer and activist Parker Palmer has focused much of his energy and writing on the challenge of living a whole and undivided life, or aligning soul and role, as he says. Essentially, he is interested in what it means to have integrity. He describes this using a visual, which I want to share with you today. It involves this piece of paper. So imagine that this is your life. The white side is your inner life, your ideas and intuitions and feelings, values, faith, your mind and heart and spirit, your true self or your soul. And this other side, the red side, is your outer life, the image, influence, and impact that you project out to the world. Now, as adults, at one time or another, or maybe as an ongoing way of life, we do this. We put up a wall of separation between our inner and our outer life, protecting the vulnerabilities of our inner life from the world that we live in. And this might include parts of our identities that we feel are not safe to share with our communities. But if the paper stays here long enough, notice how it's right in front of my eyes, if we live behind that wall long enough, our inner life can disappear even from our own view, and the wall becomes all that we know. But when we do recognize that this wall exists, we often take a step toward integrity by trying to reorder and reintegrate our lives, our inner and outer lives and values and beliefs by doing this. But the thing about this is that there is still an inside and an outside. So what does true integrity look like? What it looks like is this. This is a Mobius strip, named as such because it was discovered by German mathematician August Ferdinand Mobius. And in mathematics, the Mobius strip is a surface with only one side and one boundary. If you trace your finger on what seems to be the outside as you go around, you find yourself on what seems to be the inside, just by continuing. And then you continue, and you find yourself again on what seems to be the outside of the Mobius strip. So, if life is a Mobius strip, there really is no inside or outside. There is only one reality. Integrity is the state of being whole and undivided, which is why the Mobius strip, I think, is such a beautiful representation of this way of living. As Parker Palmer says, the inside and the outside of the Mobius strip and of ourselves are co-creating each other. Whatever is inside us continually flows outward to help form or deform the world, he says. And whatever is outside of us continually flows inward to help form or deform our lives. We travel the Mobius strip of life making choices about what we project and what we absorb. And these choices can be life-giving for the world, for other people, and for ourselves, or not. In the poem that you heard Kathleen read earlier by David White, he writes, "Hold to your own truth at the center of the image you were born with." And this is what it means to live with integrity. When we hold to this truth, it shapes our friendships, our work, and our life choices in ways that are life-giving, because we know and are being true to who we are. The wood carver in the ancient Chinese story that you heard earlier is an example of this integration. Because of who he is and what he is called to do, when he encounters the right tree, the bell stand appears, as if it were the work of the spirits. But what made this possible was an alignment of soul and role. Our integrity is constructed in large part by the choices that we make, even by what may seem like everyday little choices. For example, a few weeks ago, I was at the store buying cushions for my patio furniture. They were big cushions, seat and back attached by plastic ties. I had piled them high in the cart and shoved them in there so they didn't fall out or knock over displays in my way. And when I went to pay, the checkout person said, "2?" as she scanned the tag nearest her. I paused and I said, "No, there's 3. Now I could have just said, "Yeah," and taken advantage of the situation, having to pay for only 2 cushions instead of 3. And some people may have jumped at the opportunity, not even hesitating. But that's not who I am. It's not the center of the image I was born with. I'm not someone who takes advantage of others and lies to save a buck. I'm someone who is or tries to always be honest. But integrity is about more than honesty or telling the truth. Sometimes those are mixed up, conflated. It's about being true to who you are, what you believe, and what you say. So it is the sum total of all those small, everyday choices to be honest, choices that are life-giving instead of life-diminishing. I think that we generally expect integrity of one another. I can recall multiple times in recent weeks that were like the patio cushion incident. I stood at a checkout counter, my arms full of pool noodles or bubble wands. Can you tell I'm preparing for a first birthday party? And the checkout person just asked me how many I had without verifying or counting. Now, there's undoubtedly an element of privilege at play here. And I believe that there is also something deep within us that makes us want to believe that others have integrity. We are called to live with integrity by expecting it of one another. When someone expects me to be real and true, they're calling me to hold to that inner truth at the core of who I am. There is a spiritual invitation in this exchange as well. Integrity is a spiritual practice. It's not a characteristic or quality of an individual, but it's a way of being and living. The first part of this practice is to discern, as with many spiritual practices, to discern, to identify, and to listen to our core. Who am I? What is that image I was born with, my core, my soul? The poet Shel Silverstein calls it the voice in this simple poem, which goes, "There is a voice inside of you that whispers all day long. I feel that this is right for me. I know that this is wrong. No teacher, preacher, parent, friend, or wise man can decide what's right for you. Just listen to that voice that speaks inside." So simple, right? And then there is the spiritual work of strengthening this core, or of amplifying that little whispering voice inside of us, which we do by making choice after choice. Every time we make a choice about what we project and what we absorb on that Mobius strip, it's like we're working our integrity muscle. Joe Lillian's wordling, quoted in the book Emergent Strategy, which I've been reading this summer, writes, "From starfish, I have learned that if we keep our core intact, we can regenerate. We can fall apart, lose limbs, and regrow them as long as we don't let anyone threaten that central disk's integrity. We can grow so many different arms depending on what kind of sea star we are. We have to nourish ourselves with the resources we're surrounded by, and by doing so, we help keep ecosystems delicately balanced." I love this image of us as starfish. Basically, what she's saying is by fortifying your core and keeping it intact, you can weather whatever comes, whatever temptations present themselves, whatever messages you receive from this world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else. When you know and listen to your true self, you can be like the starfish, regenerating when needed, and this helps contribute to the delicately balanced ecosystem. If you're like me, you may need some help with this spiritual practice. It helps to have a community who will remind you of who you are and support you in holding to that core. A community that models integrity. And this is one of the many reasons to be part of a community like church. But of course, all institutions, including churches, struggle with integrity just as individuals do. Are we who we say we are? Do we walk our talk? Now, doing this is not enough. As a church, we can't just say, this is who we are on the inside. Come in and check us out. We must instead be this. Our actions in the community must be reflective of the core identity that we claim and of the values that run deep in our tradition and in our bones. So how do our structures and our actions reflect that we are genuinely inclusive, rationally spiritual, and joyfully deep? How do they reflect that we are a church committed to creating love and justice in our lives and in our church and in our world? It is up to each of us to help make it so, because you are the church. And it's also up to our leadership, who I can assure you are asking these questions and making choices accordingly. But in a time when integrity can be hard to find, it's not being modeled by those in charge of our government and most powerful institutions, we as individuals and as a church have an important role to play. Just as the choices that we make about what we put out into the world and what we take in co-create our individual integrity, I believe that the choices we make as individuals and as a church help to co-create a society with integrity. Each time we are honest, true to ourselves, humble about our shortcomings and mistakes, and practice discernment and fortification of that integral core, we model integrity in life-giving ways, which helps to transform the culture in which we live. We are all surrounded by forces that tempt us to be other than who we are. But as the poet David White reminds us, there is only one life you can call your own, and 1,000 others you can call by any name you want. So let's live our own and live it with integrity. We are here to strengthen and fortify each other on the journey. May it be so, and amen.